Okay, so we all try to make pretty decent food choices, right?
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
maybe you grab a chocolate milk, for the calcium, or an iced tea because it feels lighter than soda.
Or that protein bar after a workout thinking it's the healthy option.
Exactly. But have you ever stopped to think just how much um, hidden sugar might be lurking in those things? Things that seem pretty innocent.
It's a real eye-opener when you actually start looking into it.
So that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, today we've pulled together a whole bunch of different information. We've got health articles, some pretty detailed scientific findings, a report from the American Medical
Oh,
Association,
interesting.
and even a take from TikTok, which adds a different angle.
Okay.
And we're focusing on, deciphering where these hidden sugars are, figuring out the condiment
And a
situation,
condiment aisle.
understanding foods marketed as healthy that, well, maybe aren't, getting into high fructose corn syrup, and importantly, finding practical ways to keep blood sugar balanced.
Right. And our goal here isn't to make you feel like you need, I don't know, a degree in nutrition just to go grocery shopping.
Absolutely not.
It's more about arming you with some straightforward knowledge so you can make more informed choices, without feeling totally overwhelmed by it all.
Makes sense.
Okay, let's dive in. Starting with where sugar loves to hide those places you really don't expect it.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising how much added sugar sneaks into foods we generally think are pretty healthy.
Like what?
Well, take chocolate milk. Yes, okay, it has calcium, it has protein, those are good things, definitely beneficial.
Right.
But a single serving, it can pack almost 12 grams of added sugar.
12 grams. Wow. How much is that?
That's nearly 3 teaspoons, which, adds up pretty quickly over a day if you're not paying attention.
Mm, definitely makes you think. And it's not just stuff marketed for kids, is it?
No, not at all.
I always think of iced tea as like a healthier swap for soda.
A lot of people do, but many of those commercial iced teas, they can have around 35 grams of sugar in a standard 12-ounce serving.
35. That's basically a Coke.
Pretty much, yeah. It really shows how easily our perception of healthy can be shaped by marketing, doesn't it?
It really does.
And when you look at the bigger picture, these little bits of sugar here and there, they really accumulate.
Okay, what else?
Think about protein bars, often linked with fitness, health, that quick protein boost.
Mm-hmm.
But many of them, they contain upwards of 20 grams of added sugar.
20 grams. So like we said.
Puts them right in candy bar territory.
Right. So you have this trade-off, right? The convenience of the bar versus what you're actually getting nutritionally.
Exactly. What are you actually sacrificing for that quick protein fix? Is it worth the sugar load?
That's a really good point. So if we're trying to avoid that sugary protein bar, what are some, smarter choices after workout maybe?
That's a key question. Instead of those really sweet bars, maybe something like plain yogurt could give you a good protein boost without all that added sugar.
Okay.
And this just hammers home the point. You really need to become a bit of a label detective.
Always comes back to the label.
Always. Even something like pre-made soup, which you'd never really think of as sugary.
Soup, really?
Yeah, it can have surprising amounts of added sugar. Sometimes it's for flavor, sometimes texture. It's just not something most of us automatically check for in soup.
Wow, soup. That's a genuine surprise. Okay, so we found some sugar hideouts. Let's talk about how we add flavor condiments. They make food tastier, but are we sometimes adding a sugar bomb without realizing it?
Condiments are fascinating because, yes, they can be great flavor enhancers and some can actually add health benefits.
Kind of like what?
Well, think about pesto. It's a good source of zinc, which is great for immune health. Salsa is usually low-cal.
Right.
Tahini gives you plant-based protein. Mustard is low-calorie and often has turmeric, which might have anti-inflammatory effects.
And I read about fermented ones too, like kimchi and sauerkraut.
Yeah.
They have probiotics.
Exactly. Great for gut health. Hummus gives you protein and fiber. Guacamole, well, avocados mean healthy fats and fiber.
So the condiment aisle isn't all bad news then.
Not at all. Plain Greek yogurt is fantastic protein, calcium, great sub for sour cream or mayo. Nut butters have protein and magnesium.
But watch the added sugar in those, right?
Definitely need to watch that. Apple cider vinegar might help with blood sugar control. Raw honey in moderation has antioxidants, maybe some anti-inflammatory properties.
Moderation being key there.
Absolutely. Then you've got things like nutritional yeast for B12, grass-fed butter, again in moderation, for CLA and omega-3s, lemon juice for vitamin C. Balsamic vinegar has antioxidants.
What about spicy stuff?
Red hot sauce, often low-cal, has capsaicin. Toasted sesame oil is good as a finishing oil, anti-inflammatory properties. Extra virgin olive oil, great for heart health, but best used with little or no cooking.
Right, keep the heat low.
And even tamari, often more protein than soy sauce, usually gluten-free. So yeah, lots of potentially good choices.
That's actually a pretty impressive list of healthier options. But I suspect there's a flip side. Some condiments we should maybe limit.
Oh, definitely. There are condiments to be cautious with. Ranch dressing, for example, usually very high in calories and unhealthy fats.
Okay.
Fat-free dressings often make up for lack of fat with loads of sugar and salt.
Ah, the classic trade-off.
Yep. Barbecue sauce is almost always packed with sugar. Pancake syrup, often just high fructose corn syrup.
Of course.
Queso can have additives like MSG. Margarine might contain trans fats, which we want to avoid. Teriyaki sauce is typically super high in sodium.
Right.
And even artificial sweeteners. Well, the research on their long-term effects is still kind of mixed.
So, bottom line with condiments, just like everything else, read the label. Don't just assume.
Read the label every time.
Okay, now let's talk about those claims on packaging. It feels like some foods are masters of disguise, right? They look healthy, but maybe they're not quite the heroes they seem.
You've really hit on something important there. This idea of deceptively unhealthy foods is a real thing, and it's especially concerning when these foods are marketed to parents and kids.
How so?
Well, these are foods that might be loaded with sugar or unhealthy fats, low in actual nutrients, but the packaging, the marketing, it all screams healthy choice.
So how do they pull that off? What are the tricks we should look out for?
Our sources point to a few main strategies. They might highlight one specific nutrient, like high in fiber or good source of vitamin C in big letters.
While ignoring the high sugar content.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They use terms like natural or whole grain, which sound good but might not reflect the overall nutritional qualities.
Snaky.
Sometimes they piggyback on the good reputation of one ingredient to make the whole product seem healthy. And of course, the package design itself, bright colors, cartoons for kids stuff, it all creates this perception of a fun, healthy food.
It's like shouting the good news and whispering the bad. Really makes you realize you have to look past the front of the box. Check those ingredients. Check the nutrition facts.
Absolutely crucial.
Which brings us neatly to a really debated topic. High fructose corn syrup. HFCS. What's the actual science? Is it really worse than sugar?
Okay, HFCS. It was developed back in the late 60s, and yeah, its use in foods shot up quite a bit after that.
Right.
The main types you see are HFCS 42 and HFCS 55. Now, composition-wise, they're actually very similar to sucrose, that's just regular table sugar. Both are roughly half fructose and half glucose.
So what's the difference then?
The main difference, chemically speaking, is that in HFCS, the fructose and glucose are separate molecules. They're free monosaccharides. In sucrose, they're bonded together as a disaccharide.
Okay.
But, and this is important, when you eat sucrose, your body breaks that bond really quickly in your small intestine anyway. So the end result is you absorb free fructose and glucose from both HFCS and sucrose. They end up looking very similar to your body once digestion starts.
That's a really key point. So if they're so similar, why did food manufacturers switch to using so much HFCS? What was the appeal?
Well, according to that AMA report from 2008, HFCS offered some real advantages for food makers. Things like better flavor enhancement in some products, improved stability and freshness, better texture, color, pourability. It just worked well technically in a lot of processed foods compared to sucrose.
Gotcha. But what about the health scares? You hear so much about HFCS being uniquely bad for you.
That's where the debate really heated up. Some early studies, mostly looking at population trends, saw a correlation. As HFCS use went up, so did obesity rates.
Right, the correlation argument.
Exactly. And some other studies in animals and some in humans hinted at potential issues with how high fructose intake might affect things like fat production in the liver.
Okay.
However, that same 2008 AMA report looked at the evidence available then and concluded there wasn't enough proof to say HFCS itself contributes more to obesity or other health problems than regular sugar does, largely because, as we said, their composition and how we absorb them are so similar.
So the AMA was basically saying the problem might not be HFCS specifically, but maybe just the fact that we started eating way more added sweeteners overall, plus more calories in general.
That seems to be a major takeaway from their report, yes. They pointed out that obesity rates rose alongside overall increases in added sugar consumption and total calories, even in places where HFCS wasn't widely used.
Interesting.
They also mentioned limitations, like the need for better long-term human studies and more accurate ways to track exactly how much HFCS people are eating. But their main advice was pretty clear. Limit all added caloric sweeteners, not just HFC.
A minimal. Okay. And what about how our bodies handle fructose versus glucose? I've heard there are differences there too.
You're right, there are some differences in metabolism. Fructose tends to empty from the stomach a bit faster. It gets absorbed in the intestine maybe a little slower and less completely than glucose.
Okay.
And importantly, fructose doesn't trigger insulin release quite as strongly as glucose does. It's also less effective at telling your brain, hey, you're full.
The satiety signal.
Right. Plus, the liver can convert excess fructose into fat maybe more readily than it does with glucose.
So that sounds potentially bad.
Well, here's the crucial context. These potential negative effects seem to happen at very high levels of fructose intake. We're talking amounts way beyond what you'd get from eating, say, a few pieces of fruit, which contain fructose naturally along with fiber and nutrients.
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
An apple isn't a soda.
Exactly. The package matters. So the issue isn't the fructose in whole fruit, it's the massive doses of added sugars, whether from HFCS or sucrose in processed foods and drinks.
Got it. So overall sugar intake is key, which leads us to how can we naturally help keep our blood sugar levels more balanced? Because that seems pretty important for overall health.
Oh, absolutely essential. Stable blood sugar means steady energy, better mood, and long-term health. You know, constantly high blood sugar increases risks for serious stuff, heart disease, kidney problems, vision loss.
And low blood sugar isn't good either, right?
Yeah.
Dizziness, feeling shaky.
Exactly. So finding that balance is key. We looked at some advice from Lena Beal, a registered dietitian, on this.
Okay, what does she recommend?
Pretty practical stuff, actually. Regular exercise is huge. Helps your body use glucose and become more sensitive to insulin.
Makes sense.
Maintaining a healthy weight is also really important. And, of course, reducing your intake of added sugars and refined carbs, the white bread, pasta, sugary drinks, those cause quick spikes.
Right. Choose fiber instead.
Yes. High-fiber foods are your friends. Whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds, veggies, fruits. Fiber slows down sugar absorption.
Good tip.
Staying hydrated is important too. Drinking enough water. Getting enough sleep that's often overlooked but impacts hormones that regulate blood sugar.
Sleep, okay.
Managing stress effectively, avoiding tobacco, limiting alcohol, and trying to eat meals around the same time each day can help too. Consistency helps your body regulate.
And remember those sneaky sugars we talked about.
Right. Ketchup, pasta sauce, salad dressings, always check those labels.
These all feel like manageable lifestyle tweaks, not some crazy diet plan. That's good.
Definitely.
Now, let's say you're trying to eat healthier, but you still want something a little sweet after dinner, especially eating out. Restaurant desserts can be, well, a lot.
It can be total sugar bombs, yeah.
Is there a more balanced approach?
There is. There's this concept called the three pleasures. It's pitched as a healthier alternative.
The three pleasures. Okay, tell me more.
It's simple, really. You aim for three things. First, fruit refreshing, naturally sweet, hydrating.
Okay.
Second, nuts for crunch, healthy fats, a bit of protein.
Nice texture contrast.
Exactly. And third, dark chocolate. Really dark stuff, like 70% cocoa or higher, less sugar, more complex flavor.
Fruit, nuts, dark chocolate. I like it.
And there's an optional fourth pleasure, maybe a tiny splash of a spirit, like port wine, if that's your thing.
That actually sounds quite elegant and definitely more nutritious than a massive slice of cheesecake.
For sure. And the great thing is, most restaurants probably have those ingredients somewhere in the kitchen, even if they aren't listed as a specific dessert.
Good point. You might just have to ask, like, could I just get some berries, a few almonds, and a piece of dark chocolate?
Precisely. It's about being proactive, shifting your thinking away from those standard, often overly sweet dessert menus. It satisfies that craving in a much more wholesome way.
I love that.
Yeah.
Very practical. Okay, changing gears slightly, let's talk about drinks that often wear a health halo. Juice. Is that natural sugar really any better?
Juice. This is a big one. The truth is, while juice comes from fruit and has vitamins, it's incredibly high in sugar, all types of fruit juice.
How high are we talking?
An average 8-ounce glass, around 30 grams of sugar.
30 grams?
Yep.
That's almost 8 teaspoons.
Yep, very similar to a glass of cola.
Wow, okay. So much for the natural health halo.
And here's the thing, even though the sugar is naturally from the fruit, when you juice it, you remove most of the fiber.
Right, the pulp.
Exactly. Without the fiber, your body absorbs that sugar really quickly, much like it absorbs the added sugar in soda. The World Health Organization actually calls juice sugar free sugars, Same category as soda sugar.
So your body doesn't really distinguish much?
Not in terms of the sugar load and rapid absorption, no. Which is why health recommendations generally advise limiting free sugar intake, and that includes juice. Eating the whole fruit is just much better. You get the fiber, feel fuller, absorb the sugar slower.
What about vegetable juice? Is that any better?
Sometimes lower in sugar, yeah, but often really high in sodium, so you have to watch that too. Some newer cold-pressed veggie juices might be better, but check the ingredients. If they add lots of carrot or beet juice, the sugar can still creep up.
So again, read the label and generally eat the whole fruit or vegetable.
That's usually the best bet. Don't fall for the marketing hype around juice being a health drink.
Got it. Eat your fruit, don't drink it.
Uh,
Okay, one last area that gets a lot of health buzz. Yogurt. Probiotics, calcium.
Yeah.
Sounds great. But are all yogurts created equal?
Unfortunately, no. This ties back to the deceptive marketing thing, actually. Many yogurts, even some organic ones, can be loaded with added sugar.
Really? Even organic?
Yeah. There was a study in 2018 looked at yogurts in UK supermarkets, found huge variations in sugar content. And get this, fewer than 9% of all the yogurts they looked at met the threshold to be considered low sugar.
9%? That's tiny.
And for yogurts marketed specifically to kids, only 2% were low sugar.
Wow. That's actually shocking.
It really shows how something positioned as a healthy staple can actually be a significant source of hidden sugar, especially for children.
So what's the best approach in the yogurt aisle then?
Go for plain unsweetened yogurt whenever possible. Plain Greek yogurt is great for protein. Then you can add your own stuff, fresh fruit, maybe a sprinkle of nuts or seeds, a tiny drizzle of honey if you need sweetness. You control the sugar that way.
Much more control. Okay.
And related to this, we did see that TikTok perspective you mentioned earlier about yakult.
Right. The probiotic drink.
Right.
What was the claim there?
The creator was suggesting that despite being marketed for gut health, it contains ingredients like maltodextrin, glucose, fructose syrup. Things they argued might actually feed the wrong kind of gut bacteria.
Okay. That's one take. How did people react to that?
Well, it's interesting. The comments on the video showed a real mix. Lots of people saying Yakult really helped their digestion. They had positive experiences.
So conflicting views.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Which just highlights how complex individual gut health and responses to food can be, and maybe reminds us to take social media health claims with a grain of salt. What works for one person might not for another. If you have concerns, best to talk to a doctor or dietitian.
Absolutely. Personalized advice is key. Nutrition isn't one size fits all. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main thing you want people listening to take away from all this?
I think the biggest thing is just developing that awareness. Being conscious of hidden sugars in everyday foods, checking condiments, questioning drinks, and being diligent about reading labels.
Don't trust the front of the package hype.
Exactly. Read the nutrition facts, read the ingredients, and whenever you can, lean towards whole, unprocessed foods. That's always a good strategy.
For sure. It's really about empowering yourself with that knowledge to make choices that feel right for your health.
Well said.
And maybe leave you with a little food for thought. What other foods or drinks out there seem healthy but might be hiding a lot of sugar? And maybe what's one simple swap you could try making this week to cut back on added sugar?
Those are great questions to ponder. Remember, even those small, informed changes you make consistently, they really can add up and make a big difference to your overall health down the line.